Welcome to Web Applications and OutSystems. In this session, we'd like to talk about the different characteristics of web applications and OutSystems. We'll start by discussing how to create a web application, and then the different modules and types of modules that will be inside of our applications. To understand more about modules, we'll talk about the modular programming model inside of OutSystems and the difference between consumer and producer modules. So let's go ahead and get started. Inside of OutSystems, our applications can be of several different types: the web apps, mobile apps, or service apps. And the reason we need inside of the wizard to select one of these application types is because web apps and mobile apps have different programming models. And inside of OutSystems, our applications are the deployment unit. And that means that those applications can be versioned and tagged for easier management. Now, web applications inside of OutSystems are going to be interacted with from the browser, so we can say they run in the browser, and those web applications will be responsive, which means that the layout of the application can be adjusted depending on the type of device that's making the request and the screen size of that device. The web apps will also follow a request-response pattern, and that's because, as we mentioned in the web development overview, that the client-side and server-side interact by making HTTP requests and sending back HTTP responses. So the basics are still in play, and the web applications will go ahead and work the way we expect them to. So to create a web app inside of OutSystems, we can ask for a new application, select the type of app as a web app, and the next question we'll get asked is which template we would like to use. There are two default templates inside of OutSystems for web applications. One that will begin creating things with a side menu for us, and another that will go ahead and give us a layout that gives us a top menu to begin with. So we can select either one of those templates, and from there it will ask us the basics of our application. What would we like to name our application? What type of description it should have? And then if we want, we can have an icon represent our application inside of Service Studio. So we can upload that icon, or if we don't have an icon, we can just select a default color and it will create a simplistic icon for us. Once we're done with that, we can ask it to create the app, and it will create our application. And the very next thing it will do is ask us which type of module we would like to put inside of that application. So the reason it is asking which type of module is each module type is a little bit different, and all of our applications should have at least one module, because the module is where we're going to define how different things will work, and if our application doesn't have any modules, then we're not really defining any types of behavior or anything about how the application should work. So here we can see our application, and it will immediately ask us to create a module. The different types of modules are web responsive, and that means that it will have a responsive user interface. And the rest of the module types are basically what they sound like as well. A web blank module will be an empty blank module. The service module will allow us to go ahead and create services. And then an extension module will allow us to integrate external components and bring them in as part of our application as well. So we can select any of these types of modules and then create our first module. Now inside of OutSystems applications, the applications will typically have one or more modules, and each module will be where a developer can begin creating things like the data model, the business logic, and some of the user interfaces for the screens. So here we can see an example of how we're going to build our OutSystems movie database, and that will include having an OSMDB module that focuses on the user interface and the logic, as well as an OSMDB core module that will focus on the data for our application. Now, the reason for this is that by putting different things into their own module, we're following a modular programming technique, and that's a software technique that allows us to try to encapsulate everything necessary to do one particular aspect of functionality. And in that way, we can separate our functionality into independent and hopefully reusable or replaceable pieces of code and components. So in this way, we might have a finance module that instead of building in all of the projects, just uses projects from another module. And finance needs to be able to reference timesheets, but the timesheets are actually built in another module as well. The timesheets understand that employees are important, but those are done in a separate module. So here we can see the concept of having different modules focus on independent pieces of code. Now inside of OutSystems, the application becomes the group or set of modules that will be deployed. So we may have a finance application that has just the finance module. Then our project control application has the projects and the timesheets inside of it. And our human resource app has the employees and the employee directory. Now, some of these you can see, like finance, needs some of the things in projects. So we refer to finance as a consumer because finance needs information about projects, and projects can be considered a producer. So some of our modules are producers. They create components that are reusable and useful, and they publicly share them. And then we have consumer modules that will actually consume those public features from other modules. Each module can be a producer or a consumer, and some applications and some modules can actually have both. So here we can see that finance is in one app and it's consuming projects, which is from a different application. Timesheets also is consuming the project info, but it does it from inside the same application. And in this case, projects is being used by finance, but projects is also using employee info, which is in another one. So projects is both a consumer and a producer module. So this modular programming concept helps us divide up the work that we need to do and manage it a little bit better. So producer modules will expose and share the features. And the way we can do that is if we have something like a movie entity that is storing information in a database, that might be inside of our OSMDB core module. And for us to share the movie entity, if we look in its properties, there's a public attribute. So this public property can be set to yes, and that means that it will expose and share that feature with other modules. Inside of OutSystems, the following elements could be set to public and be shared. So the entities that we just saw in the data, as well as structures. Inside of logic, we can do actions and roles. And inside of the user interface, we can do web blocks and screens, images, themes. And in the process area, we can go ahead and share any of the business processes or processes that are there. Now, once those are produced and shared, then obviously consumer modules will want to be able to reuse those public elements from the producers. The way we reuse things inside of OutSystems is to click on Manage Dependencies, which looks like a little plug in the toolbar, and that will open the Manage Dependencies window. From here, we can search or look over the list of all the producer modules that have agreed to expose and share certain components. And if we went in and looked at the OSMDB core module, it would show us all of the components that that module decided to make public and share. We can then select the pieces that we think are important and that we wish to reuse. And then once we select these and click OK, they'll actually be added to and become available inside of this module. So the elements that are consumed become available when we can see them in this module and use them whenever we need. So in this section, we talked about web applications and the fact that web applications are made up of modules and that those modules can be of different types. And we tried to give us a quick overview of the modular programming and how consumers and producers will interact inside of OutSystems. So that's it for web applications and OutSystems. Thanks for listening.